everyone. I am Sarah Nell-Rodriguez, and welcome to the Career Download. We have Matthew Miller with us today for Honest Careers, and I'm super excited because he's really well known throughout the data world. Maybe those of you in the Tableau world have seen him as Devs on Stage, and hopefully you'll get to see him as Devs on Stage this year as well. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
All right. We're just going to get right into it because we're all about jumping into the careers here.
Awesome.
All right. Everyone knows your name, but I'm going to ask a very invasive question now. How old are you?
Well, I'm an 80s kid, so that gives you at least a range of dates. Usually you can kind of date people by the TV shows they watched growing up. So, I mean, the fact that I remember Saturday morning cartoons kind of puts me in a specific decade, and it was kind of G.I. Joe, Thundercats, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? And then if you're a little older, you may remember the PBS 321 Contact or MathNet.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of MathNet. I love MathNet. So that kind of dates me pretty well. And I remember the Oliver North trial distinctly.
That is a lot of pop culture references you have in there. And that is a lot of 80s. I love it. Okay. So from there, we can date you as an 80s kid. Where are you from originally?
Born in Rhode Island, born at St. Joe's. If you're a Rhode Islander, you kind of date things by things that used to be, and you give directions based on locations that no longer exist. Rhode Islanders are kind of weird that way. We don't really circulate. So I born in Rhode Island, grew up there, and then now I live in Chicago.
You live in Chicago now? Okay.
Yeah, western suburb.
Was it a straight line to Chicago, or did you have stops along the way?
No, not a bit. I lived in Texas for a bit. I lived in Oklahoma. And then my family and I lived in the Netherlands up until just about the beginning of the pandemic. In fact, we moved mid-pandemic, which I don't recommend. Of course, we didn't plan it that way. We planned our move, and then the world changed. And we moved from the Netherlands to here in the western suburbs of Chicago.
So you've done a lot of moving. Have you had a favorite place that you've lived out of all those?
I would say living in the Netherlands was the best. It was just an amazing experience. We raised kids there. 2 of our kids were born there. It was really a shock for me as an American because it's just a different culture, different country, different language. And I would say I went there probably as a fiscal conservative, kind of smaller government. And I came back like pretty hardcore socialist by being like seeing how amazing their culture is. I mean, the childcare, the education system, the healthcare, it's really an amazing country. I love the Netherlands. I could talk about that for an hour. I don't know if anybody would describe Dutch cuisine as great, but I think if you've lived there, you have this weird appreciation for like a whole funnel full of nothing but French fries. It's not healthy. It's a lot of fried stuff, but you develop this like weird nostalgia for those kind of things. And I sometimes miss Dutch food.
All right. I feel like we could talk about French fries for a long time, but this is not a French fry show, sadly. But tell me about some of your hobbies.
Well, you can kind of see sort of vaguely in the background. I have a whole bunch of guitars. It's funny. I don't know if I should call myself a guitarist, but a colleague of mine says, I don't know if I'm so much a guitarist as a guy who buys guitars.
Can you tell me a bit about your home life?
Well, we have 5 kids. At least it's somewhere. Yeah, I have the same feeling. And, when I get that reaction, I've got a bunch of kind of like data jokes. I'll say like, well, it's between 4 and 7, but you have to approximate with large numbers. It's approximately 5. Yeah, we have 5 kids, and they're amazing from ages 8 to 17. And again, the oldest ones I would say are native Dutch speakers. The youngest ones have kind of forgotten it. The younger 2 were born there. And they are fascinating kids. My son is on the autism spectrum, and he likes to describe himself as neurospicy. And I think that's just a great, no, I'm not neurodivergent. I'm neurospicy. I love that. So, I used to tell him when he was little, I would say you're 20% of the kids, but you're 80% of the fun. And someday he'll figure out that fun was a euphemism. But they are amazing. They are outspoken and vivacious and vibrant and really interesting people. And, I'm not saying it's easy, but it certainly is always fresh and new.
So you've shared quite a few details, and it really makes me wonder, what are some of the main priorities that you have then?
Well, my career has, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. My career has involved a lot of being not home. In fact, my first role that took me on the road was in March of 2008. And since then, with some ebbs and flows, I've been on the road about 80%, every week gone. And there were times I'd be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And so, I would say I missed whole sections of their upbringing. We like to sometimes thumb through photos from our time living in the Netherlands and wax nostalgic about this or that. And my kids will be like, "Oh yeah, that was the time we went to that thing. Do you remember that?" And I'll say, "No, I don't. When'd you guys do that?" "Oh yeah, there was a time we did this with mommy," and I have no memory of it because I wasn't there. I was in Zurich or I was in London, and and so I missed a lot of that. So one of my priorities right now is deepening those relationships with them. My son and I are playing our way through a video game together called It Takes Two. It's adorable, by the way. I highly recommend it. I went looking for games that were cooperative play, like split screen cooperative play where we could just have something to do together. And this is just adorable storyline. It's kind of like a Pixar Toy Story type thing, but you play the characters. I won't ruin any of the puzzles, but it's a really fun kind of puzzle game you play together, and you have to work together and collaborate. So we're like talking, oh, you do that, and then I'll do this, and then I can jump over here, and it's been so fun to do that with him. My oldest and I like to bike ride together, so I'm trying to find more ways to connect with them individually. I know my parents did a lot of that when I was younger, and I just haven't for the most part. And I'd say the same thing with my wife. I don't want to be one of those couples that gets to the point where the last kid's out of the nest and you're like, wait, who are you? Right. There's some reasonable risk of that. So trying to just, to some degree, make up for lost time, where I think my career over rotated toward work and away from family.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to pivot into your career a bit now, since that was tied to some of your priorities. Let's go back to the beginning, and maybe it's in Rhode Island, but where did you go to college? Was it in Rhode Island?
Yeah, I did my MBA at the University of Rhode Island. In fact, all my siblings and my parents all did either a master's or undergrad or both at URI. URI was a great school. I mean, it's not a Harvard MBA for sure. It just didn't have that cachet, but the program was great. I met a lot of good people, and also it was international exchange as well. So we had a bunch of students from overseas who were part of it. So we got a really good cross-cultural experience there. I benefited a lot from that because it taught me the language of business. I think I may have done my MBA. This is actually an interesting topic: is when do you do an MBA? I was told when you do an MBA, it's a multiplier on your skill and experience. Well, I did mine right after my undergrad. Like I graduated, moved to Rhode Island, went and did my MBA, and I had no skill and no experience. So when I graduated with my MBA, I'm like, I'm going to make bajillions. I'm going to be successful. And, I got a job making $47,500 a year. And all my peers were making a lot more money. And it turned out that, a multiplier times zero is still zero. So my advice would be, MBA was valuable, but I didn't have a lot of context for what I was learning because I hadn't worked in the real world much yet. So I think my advice would be an MBA can be worth it, but it is a multiplier on skill and experience. And when you've worked a bit and then go do it, you're like, oh yeah, now I would apply that. I didn't have any context for like cost accounting or the internal rate of return or all those things. They just kind of were like, oh, I'm going to figure out how to solve that problem on the exam. Yeah. So I did my MBA at URI, and then went to work for a stone importer as their head of IT, making like I said, a fabulous 47.5. And it was one of those like small businesses. I used to say if it could be plugged into the wall, it was my fault and my problem. I mean, I did everything from running cable to like installing a printer and copier, writing software for inventorying our shipments as they came in. I managed our website. I mean, there was nothing that plugged into the wall that wasn't my fault and my problem. But it gave me a really broad exposure to data and analytics because my bosses were former investment bankers and they were super, super number centric. So they would say things like, they'd walk through the warehouse and they'd go, I want to know the cost of goods sold for that bit of stone that we purchased from Brazil or China or wherever. I want to know that down to the square foot. Well, that's theoretically possible, but required a whole lot of stuff, like classic data things, right? The silos for like the costs were over here, and the revenue was over here. It was a lot of work to pull that together, and so I built databases, and then I built apps over the top of them so that my boss could access from his BlackBerry anywhere and know the cost of goods sold down to the square foot. And that kind of mentality of I want to quantify everything and I want it right at my fingertips has absolutely stuck with me, because obviously that's still a massive problem for leaders today. They still are struggling to get the numbers they need right at their fingertips. So it's funny that, although at the time it was a very different tech stack to get that solution, that's still a super relevant problem and solution for people today.
So it sounds like you were able to find out a bit about data and analytics in this first role of yours with IT, and being that jack of all, or Matthew of all trades, so to speak. Would you say the analytics bug bit you at that point, that it just started to fascinate you, or what happened there?
Yeah, and again, I had some exposure to data before. Part of how I made spending money in college was writing access databases. So I worked for the university and for some local businesses. For example, I built a database to manage scholarships for music students because I was in the music department. They paid $5.35 an hour. So, and that's 5.35, just to be clear. And it was, but it got me spending money. I could afford, bean burritos and chicken fingers. So I've been playing with data even earlier on, just because I learned about Access in Excel and just found that it was an easy thing to do as kind of like a student job. It was really working for St. John Stone, as the company was called, though, that I got that awareness of how executives think about information and where they want it, how they want to consume it. I came away from that with the idea that maybe I should start a startup that lets people put numbers at their fingertips. I had this idea because I'd seen how Dropbox worked. Back in the day, you'd install Dropbox and it had to copy everything to the cloud, right? Now they have this kind of different virtual model. But at the time, the files had to live on your laptop, and then you could point Dropbox at them and it would sync them to the cloud. I thought, what if you could have a little thing that you pointed at an Excel file sitting on your laptop and it would copy it to the cloud? And then even if your laptop was closed and put away, you could still get those key numbers. And so you could almost like imagine going in and clicking on this cell and going, I want to see that cell on my phone, and I want to see the value of that cell on my phone. But then even if your laptop is shut and put away, you could still at least see the latest value. And the next time you open your laptop, it would update it. And, kind of the way we have those iOS widgets now, like I got my weather and stock price and stuff on my homepage. That's kind of what I envisioned. So I wrote up a business plan for that and pitched some investors, actually. And then, it was 2008, 2009, and nobody was spending any money, and I ended up getting another job in software. But it's funny how, that was 15, 16 years ago. And the work I did in my first job exposed me to this need to get the numbers that people care about in the places that they work. And that's still a theme for us here at Tableau today. Like, we're still pursuing that. How can we get people the numbers they want in the places they work? Of course, that's expanded, and, the vision for that has changed quite a bit. And now we have Tableau Pulse, which is driving at that. It's in pursuit of the same goal, though, right? What are the things that I care about in the places that I work when I need them?
All right, we've dropped a lot of Easter eggs. We know you work at Tableau. We should probably tell people what you do at Tableau.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you find out, let me know. There's a lot I do here that is probably not part of my title. So because I've been in the Tableau world a long time, we're skipping ahead a bit, right? All the work that I did when I was in Europe was with Tableau. I worked for 2 different Tableau resellers, and the Tableau world, especially in the early days when Tableau was so small, it was very much there was a, what's the word? A fever, a fervor, a passion. There still is, but it was almost like the passion of the underdog. Like, now we're a globally recognized leader, and I love Tableau. And there's this whole community we call the Data Fam that's very passionate about Tableau. But back then, it wasn't even cool to do data. And it wasn't cool that no one even heard of Tableau. So we felt like this little band that were like telling all our friends, about this amazing thing we discovered. And I don't know what else to compare it to. It almost had in the most positive way, like a religious sort of fervor is maybe I can compare it to, because we discovered something really cool and we wanted to tell others about it. Like, oh my gosh, this data, you can actually see and understand it. You don't have to look at it in columns and rows. So I've been using Tableau now since version 6.1. And
Man, I was version 7. I have
just
never met
barely.
anyone who started on an earlier version than me. Obviously, that is because you worked there before I did, but
Yeah. I was OG working. I mean, I remember going out to the Tableau office and meeting Christian Chabot, one of the founders, and all that. And then I worked for these VARs when I was in Europe, and then I moved back to the US and joined Tableau in product. So I work in product at Tableau is a shorter answer to that question. What I do here has changed quite a bit over the time I've been here. I have had strategy roles, I've had operational roles, I've worked on new stuff, I've worked on existing stuff. And I've also along the way gotten the chance to leverage all those relationships from those years in the Tableau community. I do a lot of things like I'm part of the visionary selection process, and I run Devs on Stage the last 3 years. I got to actually be in Devs on Stage last year. I promise I didn't put myself in the script. That was Francois, our former chief product officer, who said, "I'm going to put you on stage." And I'm doing it again this year. And it's so fun because I get to go out to all the teams and go, "What do you want to show off?" And they give me this huge list. And then we sift through it. We go, "Okay, that's cool. I like that one better. What if we put these things together?" And then we come up with stories around those, and we get devs to present. That's the cool thing about Devs on Stage is these are like amateurs at speaking. They're professional engineers, but they're amateur speakers. I think one of my devs last year, the biggest audience that they'd ever presented to was 8 people. So they went from 8 to 8,000. That's a big leap. That's not like working your way up, That's a huge, and they crushed it. Absolutely crushed it. It's one of my favorite things. I mean, obviously everyone in the earlier parts of the keynote, those are all executives and professionals and they're polished and speaker coached. But my Devs on Stage demoers
they're
are,
real.
they're real. And that's what I love
Mm-hmm.
about it. So I do Devs on Stage, a bunch of community things. And right now I lead innovation and prototyping. So basically you can kind of think of that sort of the 1 to 3 year horizon for innovation. I got to work on Tableau Gestures, which you may have seen that I demoed at the close of TC last year, working on some other things I can't talk about quite yet because it's all cool in future, but it'll show up in a future Devs on Stage for sure.
Your career is just really interesting, what you've shared, just the trajectory that you've had since you left college. And I love your enthusiasm and passion for Tableau. And I know so many people still share that too. But how have your expectations of your career changed or evolved over this time?
Well, at the beginning, when I was doing my MBA, believe it or not, I wanted to open indoor active entertainment facilities, basically laser tag places. So one of my hobbies is laser tag. I remember playing it as a preteen, probably 11, 12 years old. It was a big fad at the time. And I was like, this is so cool. It's tag, but with lasers. I don't know. I just loved it. I fell in love with it. And so I actually have something like 25, 26 sets. Oh, I actually happen to have them here in the room, which I don't normally. I didn't plan this, but these are
Laser tag.
rare. I know we're going off script, but I love it.
That's okay.
These are rare Sega laser tag sets from the 90s.
Sega. Oh my goodness.
Sega, believe it or not, Sega, like Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega Genesis, actually got into hardware games at one point, and they made these, and they were the best. They were so well made. They're durable. Nearly all of mine still work years later. I think I acquired my first set in 94, and I now have, nearly 30 of them that I've acquired from around the world off of eBay. I love to play. My kids love to play. It's super fun. You can play capture the flag and, team games. So anyhow, I wanted to open an indoor laser tag place and have a whole chain of those. So how has my career vision changed since MBA? A lot. I mean, look, my life would look a lot different if I were running a chain of laser tag places. I'm not saying I would be good at it. It would be tremendously fun. It would just look very, very different, like, hey, did you change out the Coca-Cola machine? I heard one of the customers said it's not working. I got to go clean that bathroom. Like, it's just a completely different life managing a bunch of, gaming facilities, like a Dave and Buster's type place. It's kind of what I had in mind. And so obviously it's gone a different direction. Within a few years of that, that's when I had this idea for mobile BI and putting insights. And the thing is, I'm actually kind of glad I didn't get funding, maybe. I know looking back how little I knew about how BI actually worked. Pardon me. There was a lot I just didn't know about how analytics actually worked. And so I think I would have been able to build something that had an agent that ran on your laptop and put something in the cloud and displayed a number. And then immediately people would ask for Active Directory integration and all these other things. I would have been like, I don't know what that is. So there was a ton I didn't know, but there's parts of me like I'm glad I didn't get funding and I got a chance to actually learn how analytics works. Anyway, that's a kind of long answer to your question.
No, it's so interesting because I think the thing that's really fascinating about careers is that nobody starts where they end. And
Yes.
I don't think I ever anticipated that you were going to tell me laser tag guru out of all the careers that you could have told me or your expectations.
Just when I put the headset on and it starts blinking, it looks tremendously dorky, but it's so fun.
Now I wonder if you're going to find a laser tag place in San Diego for the Tableau conference.
Oh my gosh. I'll tell you what, if we can find some people who want to play and we can find a location, I might be willing to swing for a round just
That
on
would
me.
be
That'd be hilarious. I'm sure we can get Chris McClellan to make custom shirts and see, there we go.
I
Best
think you have
TC
a
yet.
lot of very excited people right now. All right. I love this conversation, but we're going to get to the actionable part of our conversation.
All right.
Advice. You've received some bad advice in your career. Everyone has. What is the one thing that really stands out?
Well, and I know this is controversial to say, but I think follow your dreams isn't always great advice. It's kind of like how I used to think I was going to be successful in life because I had great ideas. People would say, "Well, that's a good idea," and I thought, "Oh, that's my gift. I come up with good ideas." And then I realized, wait a minute, ideas are cheap, easy. It's very easy to come up with. Plenty of people have had great ideas. How often have you seen some product come to market and go, "Man, I had the idea for that years ago," right? Yeah, but you didn't build it. At least I didn't. I remember as a kid sketching out like flying cars that had rotors, 4 rotors at the corners. Well, those are basically quadcopters. There's a company now making quadcopter cars, but like I didn't build it. If that does become a thing and we all get around in these little kind of drones that are cars, I won't get a penny of it, right? But I had the idea when I was a kid. Ideas are nothing. Execution's everything. So, and also I think a lot of our dreams are once they get under some real scrutiny, turn out to be not good ideas. Like maybe running a bunch of indoor active entertainment places would drive me nuts. I love playing laser tag. That doesn't mean that like running, because that basically means you're running food service and like working in a mall. And I think I would hate it. I would hate everything about the actual work, But my dream was laser tag. Well, that turns out I just love laser tag and wanted to find a way to do that for a living. So I think following your dreams, sometimes your dreams are foolish and need to be checked. And so I think there's a lot of value in having a council of advisors, of wise people who are emotionally separate from your ideas and can challenge them in the right way. And again, how often did somebody who achieved something great get told that's a dumb idea, that's a dumb idea, that's a dumb idea, right? And so sometimes when you hear people say that's a dumb idea, you need to go, yeah, you just don't see what I see, right? You don't believe. But that's very dangerous because you got to be very careful. Sometimes when people are saying that's a dumb idea, it's because they can see something you don't see, which is that actually this is a bad idea. It's going to, it's too much risk for what your risk profile can accommodate, et cetera. So anyway, follow your dreams is often really dangerous advice.
So let's pivot to the last piece of advice that we're going to ask you, and then we're going to close it up here. What advice would you give to yourself now?
Sorry, say it again.
Post 80s kid, going through all the experiences you've had, all the different career hopes and dreams that you just said aren't always good ones. What would you say now?
Actually, it's more than ever, despite the AI revolution, it's all about people. It's all about networks and relationships. In fact, a story I love to tell is how I ended up doing Tableau in the first place. This is one of those like burn your networking books, forget everything you know. Just be a kind person, make friends, don't be about yourself, like give to others, get interested in things and find interesting people and surround yourself with those people. And so in college, I started playing video games in one of the dorms. And there was some people playing Halo, and I'd never played Halo. I'd never even played a console before, but I learned how to play. And I met this guy named Ben. He was quiet, very smart. And we found out that we made a good team. his style of play and my style of play were very complementary. And honestly, when we were put together, we were kind of unstoppable. And what we found pretty quickly is that we had a friendship going beyond video games. And so we'd go, hey, you want to go get coffee between classes? And we stayed in touch after college. I was in his wedding. And, I wasn't trying to get something out of that networking relationship. I wasn't trying to expect that Ben would do something for me. There was no transactional nature to it. I like Ben. Ben's a really interesting person. And I hope he hears this. He's a wonderful human, a great husband, a great father, a deep thinker, brilliant at math, and was one of the first Tableau consultants in the world. Just a brilliant guy. And again, we stayed in touch because I learned things from him. I felt I could give him things. There was a point where our lives were kind of going back and forth. I did my MBA just before he did his. And so I could tell him what I learned. And so we often could learn from each other and share our experiences as we were going through life. And he's the one who reached out and said, have you ever heard of Tableau? And I like to joke that I don't know what I said in response, but I like to joke that I said, well, I took French so I can spell it. And then I, downloaded Tableau, and it absolutely changed my life because it was this brilliant piece of software that let me actually see and understand the data around me. I took some of the data I was using at work. I dragged it in. I saw outliers I'd not noticed before. And this is all part of my story I've told a bunch of times. But I was like, this is great stuff. This is really transformative. And so he's the one who got me a conversation with his boss, Bayfar, the CEO of Interworks. And it was one of those things where I talked to him first on Monday. I flew out on a Wednesday, had a job offer within a few days. And it totally changed the arc of my life. So the best networking advice I could give that was specific would be play more video games, get jobs in analytics, right? There's no connection there. It was just, I met this person who was smart and interesting, and we built a genuine relationship based on mutual respect and helping each other out. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that it benefited me in a huge way. But I didn't go into that relationship going, what can I get from Ben Balsillie, right? If I could maybe if I set a reminder to ping him every 30 days, then that'll someday benefit my career. And people who approach networking in a transactional way, ironically, it doesn't work out that way, right? Instead, you want to be surrounding yourself with and staying in touch with interesting people and giving them something, learning something from them. And then you'll just find, I think, that those opportunities just come. At least that has been my experience. Every job I've had, almost ever, has come from a relationship, a connection. And some of them have been so random that my first job at Enterprise Software came about because my wife was into historical costuming. This is a true story. This is amazing. She got into historical costuming. She met some woman online in Virginia who was also into historical costuming. This is back, in the early days of blogging and stuff. And then we were down in the DC area. She's like, I want to go meet my friend in person. And I was like, have you ever actually talked to her on the phone? I like to tell this story because I was like, she's like, we're going to drive out late at night into rural Virginia to meet my friend that I met on the internet. And I was like, I've seen this movie. This is not good. This is not good. I'm not going to spell it out, but no. You sure this is really yeah. So, we drove out there. I had no idea what to expect. And we walk in and there's this woman and her husband and their kids. And so the ladies go off to talk about costuming because that was what we were there for. And now I've got 2 hours to kill with a guy I don't know and I'm never going to see again. And it was the most awkward, okay, hi, I'm Matthew. And he's like, hi, I'm Kevin. What do you do? And he's like, well, I sell software. And I was like, oh, I write software. He's like, oh, cool. And he started showing me the software he sold. And I was like, oh, that's .NET. He's like, oh, you know .NET? I said, well, I'm actually a .NET developer. We chatted for 2 hours. I was friendly. I asked as many questions as I could, honestly, because I didn't know how to kill 2 hours at some stranger's house while my wife talked about historical costuming, right? Burn your networking books. I didn't know that this was a life-changing moment. And I was just being myself, being inquisitive, asking this guy about his work and what he did. At the end of it was like, Kevin, it was great to meet you. I'm thinking, I'll never see you again. And I'm never going to drive out to the middle of nowhere in Virginia. When I got home, there was a message from him going, have you considered a career in solutions engineering? I think you'd be really good at it. He recommended me for the job. It was my first job in enterprise software. It totally changed the arc of my career. And it's because my wife was into historical costuming. Again, burn your networking books. You never know where those connections are going to come from that are transformative to your career. And so I think just being an interesting person, being interested in people, I can't say this is a formula that'll work for everybody, but for me, it has proven to be the way that I've stumbled on opportunities I would have never found otherwise.
I feel like the lesson in that is because I think, especially since COVID, a lot of us are afraid to go out there
Yeah.
now, to put ourselves out there. And how often do you put yourself out there and something amazing like that happens? You just never know where the opportunities are or when your life is going to change, just like you were talking about.
These are things that build visibility, build connections, and you just never know what opportunities are going to come. But they're definitely not going to come if you don't take those shots. If
You know, in the words of Hamilton, you got to shoot your shot, right?
you, my seventh grader is addicted to Hamilton right now. So yes, I'm very aware of the lyrics.
And I think your story is a fantastic example of someone shooting their shot. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the video games we were playing, I think it was literally, but just I I don't even know. I could say I shot my shot. It was just being myself, and people have come to me and said, "Hey, I think you'd be good at this thing." There,
That's so interesting. Thank you for being with us today, and I can't wait to share your story with other people.
thanks for the
And
opportunity.
thank you to our listeners, and be sure to like and subscribe for more stories like Matthew's in the future. Take care.